And I said, I hate to do this to you guys, but Iran's going to have a nuclear weapon very soon. But now I'm going to take it down a little bit because we cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. When the war is over,
yes,
it's coming down.
I know you can't.
It's going to come down like a rock.
President Trump, not fazed by the latest economic data, telling reporters, I love the inflation. It comes as the so-called...
I love the inflation.
What are we doing?
Don't get started, everybody.
That would be like Keith
Everybody?
That would be like Keith Richards in a police station just blurting out, I love the cocaine, man. I love the cocaine. I mean,
Joe, it is so early.
love the inflation, Willie. I mean, what? Why?
I was trying to just
what's
go
he doing
here? Through here?
I mean, we've had blurred, he calls affordability BS. He's like, I love the inflation, man. I mean, what's going on here?
It's incredible. I mean, this comes a couple of weeks after I don't care about people's financial situations. There's now this entire catalog of lines where he's just saying the worst possible thing you could say if you were trying to, let's say, keep your party in power in the fall.
Yeah, well, it's really incredible.
You got to wonder why you don't care about that.
Yeah. Nobody doesn't not care about that. I want to talk about something that happened, Mika. Last night there's a pickup game.
Yeah, I know.
On the corner of, I think there's a basketball game. I didn't see it. I'm kind of in this Lemire thing. You know, is it better for Boston to win or New York to lose? In all things. But I understand, Willie, that a basketball game broke out after some sage was spread around the neighborhood block. Kids came out and played a little bit of basketball on the corner of 7th and 33rd. What happened?
Yeah, I was there. I happened to be walking by with a beer that I bought in a brown paper bag at the bodega, looking through the chain link fence, watching this pickup game.
Oh.
No, I was at the Garden last night for the most extraordinary sporting event I've ever seen in person, especially given the stakes that it was the NBA Finals. The New York Knicks were down 29 points in the second half. There's no way you...
San Antonio was just running them out of Madison Square Garden, and I gave up.
Right.
In the middle of the night, my dog gets sick. I go out to walk him. I pick up my phone. I have 30 texts from all my friends saying, "Wasn't that the most unbelievable game you ever seen?" So I have learned the lesson the hard way. Never give up.
That's a bad night.
Never give up on the home team. Never give up on the Knicks. I've learned my lesson.
Never give up. Never give in. And of course, Caddy K is here just to remind all of you. As Jackson Lamb would say, it's not the hope that kills you, it's the knowledge that it's the hope that kills you. So,
but I am feeling a lot of hope around this table this morning, Joe. So I hope that it's not the knowledge that it's the hope that kills them. There's a lot of hope
80% likely now.
You've still got more games to play, guys.
All I can say is, and Willie knows this, he's seen me, and we've talked about this, when our teams are ahead, that's when we duck. That's when we start talking about how sad it's going to be that we're going to lose the final 3 games and give the Spurs the championship. So you New York Knicks fans, you gloat, and we'll see what happens. Now, here's hoping that the Knicks do something they haven't done since the glory years of New York sports and win it all. It would be fantastic for him.
All right. Also with us this morning, U.S. national editor and columnist at the Financial Times, Ed Luce. We're going to be.
He's a big Spurs fan, by the way.
Yes,
so
he is. We're going to be going through. We're going to be going through yesterday's closed-door meeting, deposition before the House Oversight Committee, Bill Gates, into its investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. Also, we have more on the new reporting by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan on the struggle within the White House to contain the fallout from the Epstein files.
It's incredible.
And once again, President Trump has thrown the SAVE Act back into things.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about that. But first, the big story this morning. The United States and Iran traded strikes this morning. President Trump told Fox News the U.S. fired 49 Tomahawk missiles toward Iran, along with bombing by fighter jets, after saying earlier in the day Iranian leaders were taking too long to negotiate. The president also once again, warned strikes would continue if an agreement is not reached. Iran retaliated to the latest U.S. attacks by targeting U.S. bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. Sirens sounded in Bahrain. Kuwait's airspace was temporarily closed, and Americans in Jordan were warned to take cover. There is also escalated tension in the Strait of Hormuz, which the Iranian military has now completely ordered to be closed to all vessels.
You know, Mika, like we said yesterday, the president has been way too eager for a deal, and he's paid for it. The Wall Street Journal editorial page has a new piece out this morning, and it's called "Trump Needs a New Iran Strategy."
It goes on to say, Iran's large strike on Kuwait's airport was not a big deal, Mr. Trump said. A mere tit for tat. He said the same for Iran's Sunday strike on Israel, urging it not to reply since the missiles didn't hurt anybody. That logic leads to trouble. Only by a miracle did 2 U.S. pilots survive after an Iranian drone struck and burned inside their Apache helicopter near the Strait of Hormuz on Monday. Yet Mr. Trump's early reaction was to say that this, too, wasn't a big deal.
An attack on an Apache helicopter.
Mr. Trump won't want to hear it, but he has been dancing to Iran's tune. He will have to break from it or go down as losing the war politically despite the early military gains. Mr. Trump still hopes for a diplomatic breakthrough, but even the press's favorite unnamed Pakistani officials are now downbeat. As long as Iran believes Mr. Trump is stuck with no alternative, it will squeeze him in the talks and in Hormuz. The president's choice now is to alter the facts on the ground or leave the conflict in a worse position than Mr. Bush did in Iraq.
And they had talked about in this op-ed about what George W. Bush did with at the end in 07 with the surge and how it made a difference, and said he's going to have to figure out militarily how to open up the strait and keep the strait open. Also, he may want to go in and do a joint operation with the Israelis to seize their nuclear material. Very risky move, the Wall Street Journal editorial says. But sitting back and waiting for the Iranians to negotiate and on the Iranians' goodwill, Ed Luce always leads to trouble. You, of course, as everybody knows, you wrote the biography of Dr. Brzezinski. That gets you inside the Carter White House during those tortuous days where Chris Matthews has said time and time again on this show, we would be told there was going to be a deal. We got excited. We did everything we thought that would line up the deal to get the hostages home. And then the Iranians would pull the rug out from under us. And he said they did it time and time again. This is what they do. They just play U.S. presidents. And if those U.S. presidents look like they need a deal, that's when things get really tough, because that's when the Iranians clamp down.
Yeah, I mean, they are famously known worldwide, not just as Iranians, but as Persians through history, as very tough hagglers and negotiators. And they play for time, and they feint, and they walk off, and they play mind games with the people they're negotiating with. Carter did discover this to his lasting cost several times during that 1980 presidential campaign with Reagan. It looked like a deal to release the hostages was about to happen, really 4 or 5 times, and that would have transformed the mood on the campaign trail. And then Iran pulled the rug. And it turns out, I mean, Iran really needed weapons, because Saddam Hussein's Iraq had just invaded Iran. Iran really needed weapons, so that was finally the leverage Carter had been seeking to get those hostages out. And they kept going right up to the brink of a deal, and lots of public positive statements from the White House, and then Iran would pull the rug. Now, there's a theory as to, why that might have been happening in terms of the Reagan campaign's back-channel communications with the Iranians, but this has been going on for 47 years at least. I mean, U.S. presidents, with patience and time and a strategy and a theory of the case, like Barack Obama had with the 2015 nuclear deal, might get somewhere. But if you're in a hurry, Iran's got more time.
Yeah, they've got more time, and they will walk away. as you know, David Ignatius told us yesterday, you have to let the Iranians know that you're willing to walk away, that you don't want the rug, or you don't want the nuclear deal. You've got to be willing to do that. They weren't. This headline, Willie, I just am noticing this headline. We have seen a headline in Financial Times for Ed Luce's article that somehow manages to insult supporters of both of the gentlemen in that headline. Trump supporters going, how dare you compare us to Jimmy Carter? And Jimmy Carter supporters saying, how dare you compare such a good man to Donald Trump? But there it is. The common denominator, Iran.
Yes.
It is, if you depend on the goodwill of Iran's negotiators, and if they see a weakness, man, they know how to leverage that, and they will exploit it. And Jimmy Carter had an election in 1980 that he was trying to make everything just right for, and the Iranians wouldn't do it. And now you have Donald Trump. They know he has the midterms to worry about, so they are not worried about making a deal right now.
And he says he doesn't care about the midterms. He said that out loud, too. But he is clearly desperate to get a deal and to walk away from this board. Remember, he said again a couple of weeks ago, he's kind of bored. He finds his negotiations boring. He doesn't quite care. He'd love to turn the page to something else. And Richard, at the beginning of this war, President Trump thought he could bomb Iran into submission. We're the United States of America. We can do whatever we need to do. We heard that kind of swagger from the defense secretary as well. And it has turned out that Iran, as always, for generations and centuries, is a much more complicated problem than that is. So if the president is in the Situation Room yesterday talking to his national security team about new strikes, I guess the question is, to what end? You bomb more targets, and then what happens?
Well, that's the emptiness of the Wall Street Journal editorial. That's the emptiness of the Secretary of War, as he now calls himself, saying that we're going to bomb our way to successful negotiations. There's nothing in history, recent or distant, that suggests that will be the case. Iran is pretty good at taking punches. So that's the triumph of hope over strategy, the triumph of hope over history and over experience. So that's not going to work. Plus, as we've seen, the United States appears to have hit a water storage area in southern Iran. Well, what do we want to see? Do we want to see Iran go after the Saudi desalination plants? Do we want to see, basically, most of the energy infrastructure and water infrastructure in the region has been off limits. The last thing in the world we should want to see is what has been a crisis become a true calamity for the region and the world. So we've got to be really careful. So not only will more military action probably not bring the negotiating result, escalation will not serve us. The president knows that, which, by the way, is
Richard,
the reason
what's the
he's
answer
been so
then?
hesitant.
What's the answer then, Richard? Is the answer using military options to open the strait? Is it the status quo? What is, if you were advising the president this morning, what would it be? What would you tell him? I would tell him, on the nuclear, just continue to send the message. So long as you don't change the status of the nuclear materials, we won't attack that. That's fine. We've lived with that for months, Joe. We can do that. And there'll be no financial transfers of any sort until you open the strait. We keep the blockade in place, and we have to wait. That is our strategy for now. It might mean waiting a little bit long. Iran is in serious economic difficulty, and what we try to do, I think where we can, we ramp up economic pressure on Iran. That is ultimately the Achilles heel of the regime. You sound like you agree with J.D. Vance more than Donald Trump, who always says this deal is 2 or 3 days away. J.D. Vance saying this may take a year. If you wanted, he didn't say if you want to do it the right way, but he said we may be in this fight for a year. But what you're saying is if you want to do this the right way, and you're the president, you're just going to have to wait it out. It's not going to be in 3 days. It's not going to be in 5 days. It might be in 3 to 5 months where you maintain the status quo. You have this sort of Cold War. And you wait for Iran to need a deal because they're being so choked off economically by the Richard Haas blockade. Trademark reserved 2026, Richard Haas.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think it'll be a year. I think it's sooner than that. It is, again, as I was saying, the Achilles heel of this regime. You don't do things like the administration did, which was to let Iran sell oil on the open market for the ships that were out there. So you look for every opportunity you have to ramp up the economic pressure. But yeah, Joe, it might take another few weeks or a few months, but I believe we will get there, and that is a better way to get there. Everything the Wall Street Journal proposes. Sending in troops to take out the enriched uranium. Are you kidding? You know, the risk of new bombing. A convoying operation in the Strait is really messy. The amount of naval assets and air assets you'd have to use to get virtually no oil through, the ratios make no sense. So yeah, we don't have great options, and guess what? That's what happens when you start a war you shouldn't start.
So, Caddy, let's talk about the outcome of those potentially not great options. We know President Trump, he keeps threatening violence. Yes, we've seen a little bit of escalation the last couple of days, but he still doesn't want to resume full-fledged conflict. He's made that very clear, in part, because Richard just said, because the next steps would likely be, though he talks, striking infrastructure, striking power plants, striking water plants. And not only would that potentially create a humanitarian crisis in Iran, but more than that, more immediately, that would be Iran striking back and doing the same to its neighbors in the region. So if we do just settle into this sort of Cold War, like low-level hostilities, what that's going to do is keep energy prices really high for a long time as we barrel towards the midterms.
Yeah, and every week that the energy price is higher, we're getting closer to November when that vote takes place. I think the only downside of what Richard's suggesting is that we could be reaching something of a more critical moment in energy prices from what I'm hearing, that U.S. inventories are the lowest they've ever been on record at the moment because so much oil is getting exported from the United States. The Chinese have been holding off on imports of oil, which is partly why the prices have not got higher, but that could change too. Now, the Iranians are getting some out. They're getting some out by truck through Pakistan. They're getting some out by truck through Turkey. So, yes, they're in a financial squeeze, but they are managing to export about half of what they were exporting before. They're not totally up against the wall in terms of their finances. So if this takes a while, the question is, there are two parallel tracks. How long do we wait, and how much is it going to take before the oil prices really spike? And then I think you have a political situation here that is not tolerable. I think the president can manage the situation here at the moment, but if we see this summer an extra spike in gas prices at the pump, that's going to cause him even more problems and make him want to wrap this up quicker.
You know, Caddy, great point. And I've just got to say, I want to just tell you really quickly, I was in New York and, you know, walking down the street with Willie, we were going to off-track betting, which is what we usually do after our 4-martini lunch. And can I see Caddy, please, since I'm talking to her? Oh. TJ, you're so rude. And I had somebody from Australia come up, and this is not an unusual thing. People in Australia actually follow this show a good bit, and they'll come up, but they run up to me and they go, "Oh my God, Joe Scarborough, Joe Scarborough." I go, yeah, we do Morning Joe. They go, "Do you know Caddy K?" I go, "Of course we know Caddy. We listen to the rest of his politics every day." I mean, your show, it really is. I mean, we hear about it wherever we go. And I think the most remarkable thing Willie and I said at the time was, you know, this show has actually survived about 473 Scaramucci's. Like, you guys are big, and you and the mooch just keep on keeping on.
Save the mooch.
Well, look, I feel a little bit like we're cheaper than therapy for the rest of the world, and that's why they're tuning in at the moment. This audience in Australia, your Australian tourist who's listening, it's this fascination. It's the train wreck situation of America. Where is America going? We're going to be talking about the World Cup later on. Even that, this should have been America's big soft power debut. And you know what the stories are around the world? They're of the referees who can't get in. They're of the tourists that can't get the visas. They're of the empty hotel rooms because nobody wants to come to America at the moment. And people are watching to think, where is this country going? I mean, that's the reality.
It's all on the rest is politics.
Follow the rest
Still
is
ahead
politics.
on Morning Joe.
Exactly.
President Trump's seemingly not-so-secret mission out of...
Yesterday, about a secret mission to take oil out of Iran.
You know, we've been taking out millions of barrels of oil. Nobody knows it. You know who doesn't know about it? Iran, until right now. We took out the other night 22 ships. Late at night with no lights, because they don't have any radar, because we blasted the crap out of it. We took out, that's why oil's $85 a barrel. And again, we're taking out millions which I'm just announcing today for the first time. But we've been taking out millions of barrels of oil, millions of barrels. Every night we took out oil. But now I'm going to tell you because they just figured it out. So now that they figured it out, I can tell you. It was very hard for me. I wanted to say it so badly, but I didn't want to ruin it. But it was very hard. But millions of barrels of oil has come out. And that's why it's at $85, $90 a barrel instead of $250.
Nobody knows about it until now. About 2 hours later, the president posted on social media claiming the effort has resulted in 100 million barrels of oil making its way through the Strait of Hormuz. But the New York Times reports the announcement was not a previously undisclosed mission. A senior U.S. military official told the paper the president was referring to an American effort to steer the passage of dozens of commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. And while the U.S. guided vessels have been turning off their transponders to avoid detection when crossing that narrow waterway, it could hardly have been news to Iran because late last month, the New York Times reported U.S. Central Command had shepherded about 70 commercial ships through the strait. The military official told the paper more than 200 ships now have made it through the waterway in just over a month. The Times points out that before the war, traffic through the strait was typically about 3,000 ships per month. Richard Haas, also Energy Secretary Chris Wright was asked about the president's claim during a congressional testimony yesterday, had no idea what he was talking about. He said he was the first he'd heard of it and that the president perhaps was, quote, speaking casually about the transport of oil through the strait.
No, this president is right. You know, there's a small number of ships, a fraction of the normal traffic that have essentially gone dark and are still getting through. What Caddy referred to before is a much more significant number, the Chinese demand destruction. China has reduced its imports by over 3 million barrels a day. That is enormous. We're also seeing demand destruction in other countries. They're putting in policies in place to discourage people from driving, discourage people from going using airplanes and so forth. So that's also, you know, it's a costly way, but it's a sustainable approach. And, you know, coming back to our previous conversation, we were talking about it around the table, something we ought to be talking about. Why don't we go after the Iranian oil that's traveled by land? Why is it they should have an exemption there? We blockade them through the strait. Why don't we think about blockading them on land, whether it's rail or truck? We ought to basically say you can't benefit from oil unless everybody benefits from oil.
The Richard Haas blockade 2.0.
There it is.
2.0, there it is.
Another patent.
It's all over this. Ed Luce, you know, there's obviously the economic considerations here, but there's also like projection of power, or in this case, weakness. I mean, President Trump so grasping for any kind of good news story, overselling that there, regaling reporters in the Oval Office about a secret mission that turns out to not be so secret. I mean, you know, he is so anxious to get out of this war, but we also know consumed with, frankly, the PR hit, that this has not gone well, that he might have to take a deal that in his mind is worse than what Obama get. And certainly, you know, the U.S. now looks far weaker on the global stage than we did before the end of February when this war began.
Yes, I can't help. I've been chuckling since Joe's mention of Keith Richards, the idea of President Trump snorting lines of inflation from his desk is just not going to leave me. But yeah, the idea that Pete Hegseth, you know, that we're bombing to negotiate, there isn't much left to bomb. You know, all the big military targets, the Navy, everything's really been hit. Now, of course, there is all the time the Iranians are sort of setting up new missile production sites and drone production. So there's a moving target there. But essentially, if you want to use bombs to force them to negotiate, well, then you're going to sort of widen your targets. And so that's why we're hearing about the hitting of water plants and you know, potentially electricity grids. That kind of stuff's going to come into play, which then risks war crimes. But it also risks Iran doing what it did in mid-March after the Americans and the Israelis hit the South Pars gas field, its massive gas field. The Iranians retaliated by hitting Qatar's massive gas field. And that really escalated the war. That really spooked the markets. And that showed that even though Iran's, you know, conventional military had been pretty much wiped out, it could still hold the global economy hostage. And these latest sort of bombing responses following the Apache helicopter, they look like this, you know, the signal of a strong president, using America's awesome firepower to change the situation at the negotiating table. It is not that. This is actually, we've got no options left. We have no ideas. And so I take it quite seriously when J.D. Vance, who is a skeptic of this war, says it could happen very soon, meaning maybe next week, maybe a few months. Yeah. That's the picture we're at. And there is no new sort of Hail Mary that's come to Trump's mind.
Yeah, Ed Luce, again, looking at modern history that could guide us on what is happening in this moment and the president's decisions. Ed Luce of the Financial Times, thank you very much for coming on this morning. We'll be reading your latest piece online right now. There it is. Still ahead on Morning Joe, President Trump is once again calling on Republicans to pass the SAVE Act.
And like every New Yorker on the subway this morning, reading the New York Post, Pablo.
Oh, Willie.
Put it into words in a way I haven't even been able to this morning.
You were at the Garden.
I was there.
I was my friends from high school watching this in the city. This is why you watch sports.
Yes.
This is why you suffer and you have PTSD from all the ways in which this could be the bad timeline. We had, in my head, lost. Obviously.
You weren't alone in that feeling.
29 points, never had seen it. Never had seen it. To watch the score bug, it's just like, yeah, this is the documentary in which you can point to all of the reasons why now this is a nightmare. And instead, the city has never felt like this.
They ran.
No. Lemire and I have had that experience in New York wearing Red Sox caps, but it's far different than that. But
yeah, because they're not strangers.
I just do want to note here, Willie, that Nick Saban once got in trouble, one of the few times at Alabama, for comparing an Alabama game to 9/11. Pulitzer Prize winner Pablo Torre just compared the Knicks win to 9/11. Lemire,
I think he was talking about the unity of the city.
That's right.
I wouldn't draw that conclusion.
I would say it was like that, but what if it was the opposite also? That would be the argument.
Larry David.
What else has made Larry David look like that? Have you ever seen Larry David look like that?
No, I will say this is probably, if you go back to New York sports, you talked about another time when New York was this unified over a sporting event. I really do think you would have to probably go back to Namath winning Super Bowl III in '69, the Miracle Mets of '69. If the Knicks end up pulling this off, this will be really one of the great achievements in New York sports over the past 50 years, 50, 60 years.
Joe, listening to Mike Breen saying it's good on the tip-in, that was like when the Giants won the pennant. There was a Bobby Thompson moment there, I thought.
But I've just got to say, as an outsider, somebody that really didn't listen to the day in, day out coverage of these teams, there was something, and I mean this, especially bitter about being a Knicks fan. And the Jets, again, the Jets are the worst of the worst. We understand that. But day in, day out, year in, year out, you look at the management, you look at the ownership, you look at how they have in the past taken, I think, one of the most profitable teams in the world and just made a mess of things year in and year out. So explain why this moment feels so special to these New York fans who have had to sit and watch some of the worst management of a franchise in sports history.
Well, it starts with time. It's been 53 years. That's a long time to not win a championship, especially in a city that's used to winning championships in other sports. And to your point, in more recent years, the team makes a ton of money as a business. It does great, but it doesn't always put the best product on the floor. There's a reason LeBron James never came here as a free agent. There's a reason a couple years ago Donovan Mitchell, who grew up around here, didn't come to New York. There was something about the way that the team was operated or the team was assembled that guys didn't want to come here. But going back even a little bit further, I've been a fan since I was 5 years old. I was wearing a Patrick Ewing jersey last night that I got when I was like 10 years old. I don't know, it must have been really big when I got it because I was wearing it last night. But the point is, I remember where I was when we won the lottery.
Wow.
I was 10 years old, and to get Patrick Ewing in 1985. And that was going to change everything. We were going to win multiple championships. We were going to be a dynasty.
Yeah.
And it never happened, thanks to Michael Jordan in large part. He was in the way always. We got our shot in '94, lost in 7 games to the Rockets. So the Ewing years, as great as he was, as great as he remains, didn't deliver, and that was gutting to fans over those 15 years or so. And then, man, Pablo, we went into the wilderness for a long time there. We snuck into that NBA Finals in '99, but we were an 8th seed. It was a strike-shortened season, didn't feel right. And so it's taken until now, from '73, then through the '80s and '90s, all the frustrations against the Bulls, to get to this point. So I think you've just had this build to this moment, and you felt it in the Garden last night.
And let's be very blunt about this. The Knicks are owned by James Dolan. Yeah. And when you saw the way that this documentary was coming together, in which the vibes of this city that I was just trying to sing the praises of were disrupted because James Dolan invites the president. And suddenly the story is not about this team.